Hey, everybody, thanks for joining us for another episode of I Only Ask Because. Your host, Tony, my co host, Dr. E. And we had a very interesting Super Bowl weekend. So I just want to get right into talking about, I guess, the game, but then also just, of course, the halftime show and everything going around with that. So you want to go ahead and get us started?
I will start with why is everybody being so petty? I only asked because I thought that in terms of the halftime show, even though that is not my preferred genre, say of music or anything, I really don't know any music by that artist.
Yeah.
I was introduced to it obviously during the halftime show, but some of the comments that I've been reading on social media seem especially petty to me. And if it's petty to me, it's probably super petty because, as your audience probably doesn't know, one of my nicknames is Petty LaBelle, right? I can be as petty as the next person, but um, hearing comments like, "We don't understand why they had to have hip hop artists," and like I've been saying, I'm sure I've said it on this show. I don't understand why people think that even though approximately 50% of, I'm just gonna keep it a buck, most of the players in the NFL, I'm quite sure, listen to hip hop a lot.
Oh, yeah.
So if we're not catering to their demographic, then what demographic should we be catering to? Again, I think this has been my favorite in terms of music, my favorite NFL season because of the new music that was introduced on Monday Night Football. And
Yeah.
I've talked to you about that before, how I think it's very representative cross culturally. But for years, I'm going to say years because I don't know how many years, on Sunday night, I've been listening to some variation of country, a country music artist. And I mean, not like a top tier country music artist. Like, maybe that sounds good to someone. Obviously, if we're getting it year after year, it does. But all I'm saying is, look, in my Rodney King voice, can we all just get along? Can we recognize that there's no such thing as paying illegal taxes, paying black taxes, and paying hip hop taxes? This is everybody's country,
Yeah.
and I can tell it's everybody's country because we all get, except for a very select few, we're all getting tax bills,
Yeah.
right? So if I'm using U.S. currency and if I'm paying U.S. taxes, then I do feel like I should be part of the consideration, which I want you to jump in, but that kind of is going to lead into my thoughts about the halftime show in general.
So, my thoughts on the game personally, it was uh it was a good football game for the Eagles. And I think a lot of people were so focused on the halftime show that they didn't even realize that that's not what we're there for. The people that were there for it, like myself, really didn't have a dog in the fight because my team's the Chicago Bears, sometimes the Titans,
Yeah,
Pittsburgh
yeah,
Steelers.
yeah.
So if I'm not complaining, I don't see why people are complaining about the halftime show that was for one of the NFL games out of all the other games that were played throughout the year. And that just goes to show that certain people know that it's bigger than them, and they're pretty much just jealous, in my opinion, that there was a black person out there that they didn't really appreciate their music. They weren't a fan of the music. And like you said, we've been listening to country on NFL games, Monday Night Football theme songs, and the national anthem. And it's just, again, there's always a country star for a predominantly African American sport. That's who's playing the game. And I've never heard of any of them complaining about the halftime show or the Star Spangled Banner, except maybe Colin Kaepernick. And then, he was blackballed. So I just think it's a lot of nerve that people are complaining about the show. And the show was a very good show. I'm not the biggest Kendrick Lamar fan, but I mean, the halftime performance, especially from the TV screen, was very, very nice to watch. It was very engaging. And I appreciated that because, again, for the people that were actually there at the game, they were there taking in kind of the atmosphere from the crowd, and when the touchdowns were actually being passed, just being in that atmosphere, that's one thing. But for us at home, we want a spectacle. We want to be able to see this stuff in 4K and all of that, and that's what the halftime show brought. That's what the cameramen who were filming the game brought, and we shouldn't really be tripping because it's not the genre of music that a lot of the fans are used to. But that's just my take.
Well, I think you brought up several points, and you know how I like to take it way, way back. Shout out to the old people like myself. But, there was a time where even my dad, so we don't have to go back that terribly far, but I can remember car rides where we were listening to baseball games. A fate worse than death. Watching paint dry is the closest example I can give you for that. But the announcers knew that they had to be specific and entertaining, or else even my dad would have been like, "Hey, this is like watching paint dry." So you fast forward, like you made the point to the halftime show and how it really is made for people watching it, on TV and not necessarily the stadium. But if you think about it, you could say that about high school football games, college football games. The bands, for example, the bands are very critical to engaging the spirit and the mood of the in-person audience, but more often than not, for like college halftime and everything, they don't even show the bands, for
Yeah.
people at home. So you're right. It's a strategic. If you think about the Grammy Awards, trust me, the people sitting in the audience, as special as they may have felt, did not get to see everything that we saw at home.
Right.
Right. They had one lens, and that was the eyeball. So, again, I agree. I definitely agree with that point. I would like to drive home also, Kendrick Lamar has a new fan in me now. And it's not necessarily even because of the music. I appreciated the artistry. I appreciated very much the symbolic nature of everything that was done. And hey, let's face it, I am the type of person that matches energy.
Yeah.
Right? So what you cannot say is that performance did not match the energy of what we're currently experiencing as a culture.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
I think he was spot on with that. I appreciated my girl Serena doing the cutest sea walk I've ever seen in my life. But I think a lot of people don't remember that during one of her celebrations at Wimbledon, she did a really quick, excited, version of that, and she was dragged through the media. Oh, that's so unprofessional, blah blah blah. So listen, this is what we've done. What we've done, and I'm still walking on air. I just have to tell you because it felt so good to be me historically in that moment, watching people step into their own power without the fear. I mean, even the Samuel L. Jackson kind of references to what we should and shouldn't do, there were so many layers to that performance. A lot of people keep talking about Drake, Drake, Drake. And, I'm like, Drake who? The message in that performance was so zoomed out in terms of what we're going through culturally that I think, Drake could have gotten missed. In fact, I think with a lot of generations, they're like, Drake who? I think one of the important things is that there was messaging going on when we had a particular world leadership figurehead in the stadium, and I feel like that was a very brave thing to do. I was discussing this morning with my husband how I'm seeing in news feeds where I'll just say it, the president was saying derogatory things and talking about how Taylor Swift was booed in the stadium and everything, and he was booed in the stadium. Now maybe I stepped away and missed the part where Taylor Swift was booed, but hey, let's break it down. Taylor Swift is a pop star, a pop icon, if you will. She is not the head of state. in
Correct.
any way, shape, or form. So I don't want my title of petty to get stripped, but it looks like I've got a huge contender. Anytime someone who is supposed to be the leader of the free world is stooping, not that Taylor Swift is low, but hey, so you've got global politics and then you've got pop music. What are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah, that was it's funny how Trump for the longest time, and I think that's part of the reason that he became the president. Obviously there was a lot that went into that, but he's just always at the forefront trying to get attention, garner attention, and that's really what you saw with the game as well. And I think a lot of people are getting more and more just embarrassed by what he's doing because he is doing exactly what he said he was going to do, and a lot of people just weren't paying attention 100% on what he was saying he was going to do. But he has a record of being very petty when it comes to anything, and it's almost for somebody his age, you wouldn't expect him to be that childish. I know kindergartners who are not as childish as the president of the United States. And I got to give it to him. That's part of the reason that he's the president because a lot of the voters, I'd say the majority of the voters that are out there are pretty childish because, again, he's shown you time after time who he is, what he stands for. And I can't be mad at him for being himself. And that's one thing I think a lot of people do kind of like about him is he'll go out there. He doesn't care if he's petty. He doesn't care if he's goofy. He doesn't care if he's childish. He's going to do what he wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to say what's on his mind. And to be, like you said, in that realm, to be the head of state for the United States of America, and you're over here trying to beef with Taylor Swift, I mean, it does kind of show who you really are. And kind of on that note, I wanted to touch on, because this has been just driving me up a wall, the whole Gulf of Mexico thing and how we've changed that to the Gulf of America. Again, that just kind of shows the pettiness of some people. Like, that's been the Gulf of Mexico. We learned that in grade school, and now you want to change the name?
Well, you have to ask yourself why. Again, I see attention seeking. I think that as a nation, we are currently and probably will continue to be for some time the laughing stock of the free world because of the largely insignificant but very damaging moves that this particular regime has begun to make. Um, I think that just in terms of being able to boast and say, hey, I did this, na nani boo boo, and everything, like you said, that is why a lot of people who like him and can relate to him, that's why. But I feel like, especially in the ballot booths last fall, one of the things we neglected to realize is that this is not WWE. This is your life. These are, and so now you're seeing farmers who, whether or not they want to admit it publicly, we know they're having regrets because of how the current regime's policies are immediately negatively impacting them. And, a lot of the people who like to use the term DEI, like code, like woke, for example, basically, if you say the whole term out, diversity, and you may need to look that word up, feel free. Equity, most probably you'll need to look that word up, feel free. And inclusion, that's the opposite of exclusion. So if you look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, who's mad about that? If it's you, again, look the words up and go talk to Jesus or whoever it is you spend time with on a daily basis, whoever's in your ear or whoever's in your heart, and ask why you have a problem with diversity or equity or inclusion.
Yeah, it's very American, I think, and it's sad that this has kind of been where we've been as a country for so long because obviously, like when it comes to slavery and racism, things of that nature, everybody was doing it. But for us to be one of the newest countries, and for us to be just who we are, it kind of shows where we've gone down this path of we were the ones that were garnishing all this attention during the civil rights era, during Reconstruction, things of that nature, even world wars. We just always have to be at the forefront of something. And there were a lot of times where I think America did, they at least tried to do what was right. But there are a lot of times where they didn't do what was right. They obviously didn't do what was right. And plenty of times where they just kind of overstepped. And that's really, I think, the the backbone of our society is we think that we need to be the best, we need to be the loudest, and that's why you're seeing so many people going back to the whole football thing having something to say about a halftime show. They don't have anything to say about, oh, what were the executive orders that President Trump signed last week or the past few weeks? What has he done since he's been in office?
Why are you using all those big words, first of all?
Look, this guy has been over here putting in work, and I can't be mad at him for that because that's what he ran on. That's what he said he was going to do. But we complain about Biden, we complain about Obama, and then when he's out here just doing petty, childish, crazy stuff, it's silence. And then when somebody's out here doing their job, which is being a performer, then all of a sudden, oh, look at that. Isn't that terrible? That music was awful. They're just out here trying to divide us. Really? That's just my whole take on the matter. And I do think it's, again, very telling where you have somebody like a Donald Trump who is running the free world. He's got time to see what's going on at an NFL game. And then, I mean...
Yeah, the first sitting president ever to attend a Super Bowl in person.
So that's a fun fact there. But, I mean, you got to admit, he's getting a lot done, and then he's still having time to fool around and beef with pop stars. So
he is getting a lot done. Just like if somebody broke into your house and, took all your things while you were away, they got a lot done. As opposed to the person who was standing at your door fiddling with the lock and they couldn't get in.
Yeah.
But, as far as your life goes, which one is the best scenario? So if you're getting a lot done by getting a lot done, you mean dismantling laws that protected the citizens of the United States. For example, consumer protection laws. What earthly purpose does it serve to have a nation of people who are not protected against corporate and big business? Like, some of the things just don't make sense. What earthly good does it do to take funding away from Head Start programs or, supplemental nutrition programs? And even if you are selfish enough as an individual to say, well, hey, if they take the supplemental nutrition funding away, at least the price of eggs will go down. No. I'm sorry. That is not how this works. So recently I saw an interview clip where Elon Musk was trying to explain his issues with diversity, equity, and inclusion. I imagine if someone wants to understand what I'm referencing, the interviewer was Don Lemon. I don't know how old the interview is, but if you Google Don Lemon and Elon Musk together, I'm sure this interview will come up. But anyway, Elon Musk was explaining that he had issues with diversity, equity, and inclusion because he feels like if someone is in an operating room, I may be paraphrasing very much, but if someone is in an operating room and they have a surgeon who has benefited from diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, the surgeon is not going to be as prepared because the standards have been lowered for that particular surgeon. And, if you're curious about how the interview played out, like I said, please Google it. But so here's the thing. When you go into an explanation with faulty information, now, I don't know, I have no evidence one way or the other if Elon Musk is only pretending not to understand diversity, equity, and inclusion, or if somehow he has gained an international stage by being that clueless and struggling that much with comprehension.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the scenario is, but what I do know is diversity, equity, and inclusion programs have to do with expanding the opportunities for people to have the chance to come in and work their butts off.
Mm-hmm.
It is not, well, you're taking your last medical school exam, so if you benefited from diversity, equity, and inclusion, you get to sit in this corner and you only have to get a 50%, but everybody else has to sit in this corner and get 100%.
Right.
How dumb, like for real though.
Mm-hmm.
How many people actually think that's what's going on? I'll go back to what we were talking about earlier. With the president's official residence, and I mean any president, not just the current president.
Mm-hmm.
The official residence is the White House. Do we all know who built the White House? I'm not saying who came up with the architectural plans or whatever. They could have done that as well, but we know that enslaved people built the White House from the ground up. So, if what you're saying is genetically enslaved people are inferior, and the generations that have sprung from enslaved people are all incompetent. Personally, if I was the president, I would be afraid to sleep at night because, maybe because all these incompetent people built my house, it might just cave in on me in the middle of the night. Like, that's the kind of logic that we're talking about, and it's not logical. So I'm not talking to President Trump right now. He's who he is, doing what he does. I'm not talking to Elon Musk right now. I'm talking to the voters in the United States of America who, fun fact, did not vote for Elon Musk for anything, but I digress. The people who voted for this type of air quote leadership, I hope it does not take 4 years, because that's going to be one heck of a lesson. But if it takes 4 years, at the end of that 4 years, I'm hoping that someone has a wake up call. Like, wake up, woke. Don't let them make you hate the word woke. I don't know what you heard, but the opposite of that is sleep. Are you asleep?
Mm-hmm.
Are you sleepwalking while your pockets are being picked by people who don't pay taxes at all? Is that you that I'm speaking to right now? That's all I'm saying. Pay attention and stop letting people play you for the okie doke. That is, to me, that's what the halftime show said. Mm-hmm. To me, watching a team that on the wink wink is, pro MAGA and pro this and pro that, again, look it up. Watching them get obliterated by another team, yeah, that fed my spirit. And I'm not embarrassed to say it. Because for me, and I have some very close friends who I love dearly, who are Kansas City Chiefs fans, so no disrespect. But I'm not even talking about the team so much as I'm talking about the rhetoric that has been built around that team, that they seem to embrace, that the President of the United States seems to embrace. So yeah, sometimes we do need a wake-up call. So wake up, woke, however you want to get up, alarm clock, bell, whatever, however you want to look at it. Sometimes we need that as a people.
I agree. Yeah, I definitely I concur with most of what you said, and I just think it's I've had going back to the halftime show. I talked with a few people that I know who were Kansas City Chiefs fans, but also some people who weren't necessarily concerned about the game, that also just could not seem to get past that halftime show. It wasn't good. I didn't get it. And that's what a lot of people who are Donald Trump fans, conservatives, they're always on that side of history. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's about freaking George Floyd or taxes or whatever. And like you said, we really shouldn't be that asleep at the wheel as a country to not understand what's happening. But I feel like so many people are awake and they're just waiting for Jesus to take the wheel, because that's really what we're looking at when it comes to voting for someone that is basically against your interests from day one. He calls you the uneducated because that's who he needs to vote for him. He loves them. And he says all of that, and you're worried about Biden, who's over here just doing his job, has experience. And you can say what you will about the economy, how that was affected, whether the person that's in power is affecting the economy, or the last 4 years, how that affected this, whatever. Of course, these people always like to use whatever's going on to their advantage. So when gas was expensive, it was Biden's fault. Or it was when gas was cheap under Biden, it was Trump's fault. And then when gas skyrocketed, it was Biden's fault. And now gas is back down. It's because Trump came in 2 days ago and fixed it. I mean, you have to pick what facts you want to use. And for the longest, these people basically use their facts when they want to. They basically use the Fox News way of thinking. So this stuff doesn't make any sense, but we're going to say it anyway, and it's the truth. And then when things actually are true that are going with our narrative, then we just want to beat that into the ground. And that's what I feel like you're saying with everything, because I know a lot of Kansas City Chiefs fans who were all pro Kansas City, and that's all they were talking about until the Super Bowl. And then the day after, it's like, what about your team? And they're like, oh, they weren't going to win anyway, or it doesn't matter, or the refs cheated, all this stuff. Like, if you get beat, you get beat. And I think that's one thing that we have to realize as a society.
Wait, the refs cheated? I didn't hear that one anyway. I'm sorry. We have to realize as a society.
We have to realize as a society that, first of all, we all have biases. We all have certain ways of thinking. But when you're wrong, you're wrong. And I think as Americans, we never can get to that point, as a whole, where if we're wrong about something, we take accountability. It's either, no, we weren't wrong because they did this, or just like in politics, it's never, we made a bad decision. Well, what was he going to do? What did he do? Look at what he did. It could have been worse. Instead of just being like, yo, I messed up. I need to fix it. I need to go ahead and do better. And that is literally the opposite of the personality of our current president. And that's the personality that he shares with a lot of these voters. They can do no wrong. Everything that they think is truth. This guy's a Christian, even though he could care less. It's crazy. Just everything that goes into their way of thinking, from religion to politics, does not add up with reality. And that's the issue that we have as a society. And that's why Elon Musk basically bought that election with misinformation, because everything that he was saying, or that he was putting out into the open, was not true. Going back to what you were saying about the whole DEI thing, people want to use these alternative facts, which is basically another word for lies, to push their narrative. And after they go through all that, they suffer the consequences, and then they want to say, well, it wasn't because of what I did. It wasn't because of XYZ. So.
Yeah, I feel like, and again, I don't want to come off as someone who is Donald Trump bashing, or Elon Musk bashing, or Republican bashing, or even MAGA bashing.
Yeah.
Because, for me, that's not what it's about. And when I sit here and have these conversations, I'm speaking as just another citizen of the United States. This is not my primary vocation.
Yeah.
So I'm having a discussion with you, and hopefully with your listeners and your viewers. And if they were in the room with us, I would hope to be able to have the same conversation. I don't think it is, it's human to fear what you don't understand. And I think that the real shame is people have been misinformed to the point where they're fearing something that is not really their foe.
Yeah.
It's a made up foe. It's made up opposition. And I think that if, as a nation, we really are able to recenter ourselves and say, hey, This is what I know to be true. This is what I can find receipts for. This is some, gassy stuff that if you blow at it, it'll disappear. And then really try and figure out, where we are. I have no illusions about this being a country that every time I wake up and every time I read something, every time I hear something, it's going to be to my liking. Like, how silly is that? And it probably would be, I'm just, in my own humility, probably would be a little bit jacked up if it was that kind of country. Like a country that, for example, wants to pretend like calories don't exist. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It could be anything, but it's difficult for me to watch a group of people push a narrative saying that another group of people is this group is substandard intellectually and physically and morally and everything else, and you're pushing the crap out of this narrative. Meanwhile, you are getting blasted in the face with facts that completely take away any what am I trying to say? These facts are flying in the face of your beliefs.
Right. Yep.
And even when you talk about, if you want to talk about Christianity, which I try not to talk about because I'm not, a Bible scholar, admittedly. However, from what I do know from the Bible, even if you only focus on the 10 Commandments, you don't want to play tit for tat with that right now.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Adultery and coveting and gluttony and like you could go on and on, but what I'm saying is, you take a family that for 8 years was really treated poorly in the media and poorly in at certain barbershops and whatever, because you had a man who was a scholar. Whatever else you want to say about this person, they were a scholar and they understood government. I'm not saying politics. I'm just saying government. Mm-hmm. You understand like where your country is juxtaposed to other countries, other nations, and you know the history of how we got where we are. Who happened to be married to a scholar? His baby mama. He actually married her before they had babies. And then they had babies, and then they were still married, and then they raised their family. They have one nuclear family. You don't have to keep checking people's last name like, but this is who, whatever. So, again, I am not trying to. I'm human, and I come from a very long line of human people. What I'm saying is, your facts are jacked up anytime you could look at that family and say, oh, they weren't really Christian. And they hate the American people. And then you drag out another family from the gutter, which will remain nameless. But if you paying any attention at all, you know who it is. In fact, I have to put families behind that because, like, again, if you want to play, if you want to play chess, do not come at me with checkers. Don't bring the checkerboard and don't bring the checker pieces if you want to play chess. If you don't know how to play chess or you're not very good at that, then stay home. Mm-hmm. But to come out and constantly insult, what do they call it? Poking the bear, insult people's intelligence, insult their hard work, and to what end? You still can't afford eggs, and I don't like eggs. So who's really ahead?
Oh, that's a classic line right there. I think that's the perfect place to end it, and that kind of gives the audience food for thought. I want to thank y'all for watching another episode of I Only Ask Because, and I'll catch you on the next one.